It was nothing to do with sexuality. It was about expression of individuality. I didn't even think about sexuality till I was in my 20s. I just wanted to do what I saw on The Sims. I wanted to play every character. I looked femme presenting. The first time I went out with the same group of people as a boy, the difference that people treated me shocked me to my core. They trick us into thinking there's only room for one trans person in the room. And it's such BS.
Full disclosure, I just finished watching the America's Next Top Model documentary on Netflix, so modeling.
Me too. I've got some tea about that myself.
Hello and welcome back to the queerest podcast telling the fiercest stories. This is Queer Talker and I'm Ben Cicchetti. Before we get to my conversation with the fabulous and fierce Joseph Harwood, I got a very quick favor to ask. Wherever you're watching or listening to this episode, hit that subscribe button, join our community, and I will keep bringing you the queerest podcast every single time. So in advance, thank you. Now to my conversation with Joe. Joe, we will start with my little game called Queer Panic. Just a rapid fire set of questions to get to know you better. And you just respond with the first thing that comes to mind. Starting with, what was the first album you ever owned?
I was really thinking about this because I don't actually remember, but my first favorite album was the Fugees, The Score.
Amazing. Okay.
Because I love Lauryn Hill. I'm a Lauryn Hill obsessive.
Okay, I love that. That's awesome. Well, speaking of music then, if you had to lip sync for your life, what song would you choose?
I wouldn't. I would never lip sync. I would try my best to sing something live if the need arose. But I don't know. I like so many like Disney songs, probably something crazy from like Hercules or like The Little Mermaid or some Disney thing.
Okay. I can feel that. Bring the full fantasy. I love it.
Yes.
What is your favorite queer movie or TV show?
My God, like I actually was thinking about this one as well. And there was a film called Shelter that I saw when I was younger. And it was such a sort of like, not cheesy, but it was kind of like the first sort of not rom-com because it's not comedic, but it was like a gay love story that was just charming. And I remember watching that when I was younger and thinking, oh my God, this is the first time I've ever seen this type of story depicted. I don't know if that is my favorite. There's so many crazy films like all the Divine stuff and all that kind of nonsense. But yeah, I think Shelter is probably my favorite one. If people haven't seen it, it's very kind of cute.
I love it. I haven't seen it, so I'm going to have to look it up now.
Yeah, it's good.
I love having something new to watch. How about your ultimate queer icon?
Pete Bands.
Great choice.
And I was lucky enough to meet him and I got to model in some of his clothes and wigs when I was a teenager. And I shot a coffee table book in them. He was amazing. I was so impressed by him because I grew up in a sort of like churchy environment. So I wasn't very aware of pop culture. So I think when I started, people thought I was really inspired by people like David Bowie, but I had no idea about any of that music. I saw Pete Bands on Big Brother and it was like, oh my God, that's someone like me. And then I really researched him, got to meet him, and I just was so fascinated by his story. And there's so many parallels about his career and mine in certain ways, different industries, but certain ways that I relate to. So he's always been my fabulous icon. And it's also, I like him because he's not the labeled as queer kind of thing. Like, and I want to defy labels while still celebrating who I am.
Yeah, I love that. That's an amazing choice. Who is one person you would like to hear on this podcast?
That's interesting. Do you know who I think needs to get onto more mainstream podcasts? Is Marilyn, that pops up in the 80s as well. I think that he is such an interesting character and I'd be intrigued to hear more of his views because I see some bite-sized things on Twitter and things. And I'm like, I want you to elaborate on this. So I want to know more. And I'm a super fan of all the people that came before me. So I would like to hear more from Marilyn.
I love that. Well, we will slide into their DMs and see if we can make it happen. And what is one word you would use to describe your childhood?
Unusual.
Let's explore that then, because I do, as listeners know, I have this theory that to understand an LGBTQ plus person as an adult, you first have to kind of understand them as a young person and the world that shaped them. So what should I know about you as a child or a teenager to understand the Joe that sits in front of me today?
Well, I grew up in a very churchy environment, as I said. So it was very sort of it wasn't negative. There was nothing negative. It wasn't like a cult or anything, but it was just I wasn't exposed to things like when Buffy the Vampire Slayer would go on TV, it'd have to be turned off. Or if I discussed the dinosaurs, I wasn't allowed to like talk about things like evolution and things like that. Like there was certain things that was sort of off bounds. But then I also did my GCSEs much earlier. I did them when I was 9. So I was way
Wow.
ahead of my year group and kept in a different class to the rest of my year group. So in addition to that, I looked incredibly like a girl. So I was very much physically different to my peers, but then I was also way ahead in terms of my schooling and I was in a different class. So it was a sort of social naivety that kind of developed. And I think that because I presented as female for so many years without even choosing to, I didn't go to a doctor and say I wanted to go on hormones. My hormones were just naturally in a mess. Um, it was like a very different experience. And then when I started to look more masculine when I got to my mid-20s, it was like going through a second puberty again. So it was like I've kind of had two lives in one.
Mm.
But I had a very amazing childhood. I learned about so many things, and I'm so lucky now that I'm older because I got to do so much like just incredible stuff that my peers didn't. And I learned so much different things because my grandparents were like kind of studious and taught me loads of stuff. And I was interested in like, I lived in a little village called Myloke, which is just outside of Brighton. And we had like all the hills and like all the wildflowers around us. So it was kind of very picturesque in some ways, but at the same time had its complications. So that's me.
How did that? I'm curious then how that experience, to have done your GCSEs at such a young age and to almost have been, separated from the group at such a young age and kind of, quote unquote, isolated as being kind of unique in that situation. How do you think that experience of being singled out in that way shaped you today, or did it shape you today?
It's made me like a tiger. Like I'm not like a pack
Mm.
creature. I'm very confident on my own. Like when I started to work as a model when I was 16, 17, I went to Asia on my own at 17 with no issue. I was always self-assured and I'm not one of these people that is scared to go to a bar on my own. And it fascinates me with young people today because you go out and you're like socially kind of like introducing yourself and things and they are terrified of people that have the confidence to do that because everything's through an app now. And it's
Yeah.
like, I'm much more of like, a personable. I want to be into sociable, so I think I'm very much like a tiger. I've like, got my territory. I work very well on my own. That's me.
That is super interesting. So then, take yourself back to that time, that upbringing, that environment. Do you remember the first LGBTQ plus person you just became aware of, either in real life or through kind of media, and how that made you feel?
I didn't really identify with LGBT. I know it sounds like silly to say that as an adult, but I saw people around Brighton who were like themed, and I saw like we used to
Mm,
call her the pink lady because she'd be headstone pink with pink colourful hair. I identify with that kind of person. It was nothing to do with sexuality. It was about expression of individuality. I didn't even think about sexuality till I was in my 20s. Honestly, I was kind of like oblivious. I really was oblivious. It might have been a hormonal thing, but I just didn't know anything. And so many incidents I went through when I was in my like mid-teens, when I was on MySpace and started to integrate in London and started to model. Now I look back, I'm like, my God, that was a bit of a dodgy situation to put myself in. I just was so naive about it because sexuality wasn't in my mind. I was oblivious and I still am sometimes a little bit naive when it comes to things like that. But I always thought that people that express themselves creatively were like me. I never saw comparison just because we like the same kind of thing. Like I'm open to dating anyone. My sexuality really is indefinable. I just want to fall in love with someone that respects me and I appreciate the context of their character. And I don't think about sexuality in too much of a strict box. But I'm probably quite weird because everyone at the moment, I think everyone's obsessed with like, oh, I'm this label, I'm this flag, I'm this thing. I've got the IKEA shark, which is something I've learned about recently. Do you know about this?
I
The young
haven't known.
trans
What's this?
kids. Oh my God, I was working with the King's Trust and I got to mentor all these young trans kids. And they were like, isn't it so great? We've got the symbol, the IKEA shark. It's like the new hanky code. And I was like, what the hell are you talking about? So I'm learning all the time about all this stuff, but I think I'm much more kind of fluid with everything than I am. And I just identify with individuality more than and authenticity. When I can see someone's being authentic in their expression, that's who I identify with.
So then in yourself, when did you first feel that, authenticness in yourself? When did you first feel authentically you? And then when did you feel you had this kind of ability to just bring that to everything you do and be unapologetically just yourself in everything you do?
That's such an interesting question. I don't really know. Like, I think I've just always been like that. I don't think I could have hidden my being at all. I'm too and I'm so silly sometimes because I say things without thinking, but it is kind of representative of who I am. I just am. I'm like too much, perhaps sometimes. I don't
I'm su-
know.
I'm super curious because you've mentioned modeling a couple of times and starting modeling at such a young age. I'm curious to hear about that world. Full disclosure, I just finished watching the next America's Next Top Model documentary on Netflix, so modeling
Me
is in
too.
my
I've got some
head.
tea about that myself.
I'm curious to know about your experience in the modeling world, how you got started in that space, and kind of what your experience was in that world.
Well, I joined MySpace when I was 13 or 14, and I started to take all these themed photographs when I was still at school. And I got scouted by a lady called Katie, who worked with Alexander McQueen. And my mum was like, what the hell? How did this manifest? Because she wasn't aware of social media at the time. This is like
Okay.
22, 23 years ago, or whatever. And by 2005, I was being invited regularly to cast in London for things like Days Confused, London Fashion Week. And I looked like this sort of like feminine, sort of kind of like an Agnes Dean kind of look, I guess I was going for at the time. But they cut my hair like David Bowie and dyed it red when I was doing all these like different shoots. So I had this very sort of androgynous punk look. And I wasn't booked to do anything feminine here. Like when I went to the agencies here, they were like, we need to make you look either more masculine or more feminine. And I was like, well, I think I can do both. But there was no such thing at the time. I think there was a couple of models. There was one called Amira Moto, who's a Puerto Rican, beautiful person. And they, female born, I believe, but look very androgynous, ambiguous. I'm not familiar with their pronouns, so forgive me if I've said that wrong. But there wasn't anyone to look up to. This is like before like Andrea Pagit came out and all this sort of like talk around non-binary. This is years before. And I didn't know what I was getting myself in for. I just thought it was exciting to go to different places and go to London. And I've had so many weird photo shoots. There was one that my my friend was actually reminding me of the other day. Me and my mum went to Old Street and we were casting for something. I can't remember what it was, but there was we I don't know what the situation was at the actual tube, but in Old Street there was like a renovation that was starting. I think it was before they finished everything. And we went down the tube and my mum for some reason leant back on the on the tube and the tube, like a scene from Final Destination, almost decapitated her. So so it was a very unusual experience, but one that stands out to me. But we had so many crazy experiences. My mum was always there with me, and my friends were always there with me. I always had like a chaperone. And there was another sort of androgynous trans model called Flo, who I worked with a lot. I found it kind of straightforward, but I think I should have done a lot more because I was a very pretty little thing when I was younger. Um, but it was weird. But I have had my own interaction with Tyra Banks myself, and I do not like her whatsoever.
Okay. So you felt the documentary was a fair representation of Tyra's personality, or what was kind of your impression?
So I did to give you some connection between the modeling and then when I went off to do makeup, like I worked in Asia and Asia was amazing to me because they had all these regional makeup products that weren't available in the UK. This is the era of the Dream Matte Mousse. You'd go to
Mm.
Maybelline in Tokyo and you'd see all these incredible mixers and hair perfumes and jelly skincare and color correctors. This wasn't in the UK at the time. And I really found in love with makeup. And makeup, I thought, would be a much more interesting job than being a model because I thought modeling. Once I'd done it for a few years, I was like, "This is not for me. I can't be bothered to do this." But makeup was artistic because it meant I could create a theme and I could define a
Yeah.
character. And I started to do these things called celebrity transformation. So I would go on YouTube, and this is way before. This is when YouTube you couldn't even have a thumbnail that long ago. Um, and I would do celebrity transformations. And my first series, I did all the supermodels and I did Tyra Banks because America's Next Model was the biggest thing. And we had this very strange interaction on Twitter where she was like, oh my God, I love you. Let's talk about this. And I think she was trying to get that person called Brian Boy to be a part of ANTM. And she then stopped talking to me. And I remember it distinctly because me and my friend at the time, Charlie, were in her house. And I was like, oh, can you please Tyra Banks is talking to me? We were like kids trying to like make our way in the world. And do you know what the lady did? She went off and repeated all of my celebrity transformations and put out a press release in People magazine in the US saying that she transformed it, but without Photoshop. Like implying that all mine was
Wow.
photoshopped. And I was like, I couldn't believe I was what, 18 or something at the time? It was
Yeah.
so bonkers. And I was thinking to myself, why would you do that? Why would you engage with me, compliment me on the work, and then go off and recreate it with a huge television show and a huge PR person? It was that, but this is how all these people work. There's a type of person when you get to that level, you are kind of a little bit evil.
Okay.
Anyway, there's some tea about that.
Yeah, I love it. And then I guess you mentioned obviously makeup, and I'm super curious to hear about kind of your journey into makeup and kind of what makeup represents for you, because you mentioned kind of the artistic side and the creative side. So is that what makeup represents to you? Was it kind of escapism, expression, rebellion? What does makeup mean to you?
Well, it was all from video games because I used to be fascinated by the way that the 3D models in video games were put together. I used to play video games on PC, and you know when you installed The Sims back in the day,
Yeah.
they would have like a folder of JPEGs or GIFs that would wrap around a 3D model. So you'd see like a flat image of someone's face, but it'd be spread out almost like someone's taken the skin off someone and smoothed it out. And I just thought, oh my God, if I can do that on my face, then I can do whatever look I want to do. I don't have to do one thing. And I was always interested in designing characters. Like I was always, since a tiny age, using my imagination to come up with different characters. And you can see it in my work because they're all themed in sort of like a sort of sci-fi character kind of underbelly of it. And I just wanted to do what I saw on The Sims. I wanted to play every character. And I was so in love with games like Final Fantasy, where you play like an ensemble cast and each character has a story or a mythos behind it or a lore. And I wanted to live my life like an ensemble cast in a video game. And that sounds bizarre, but I just thought it would be the most amazing creative output. And I think the more that I've learned about other artists and like I've learned about like so many artists have done this in their careers. And I don't know, I think it's just like the power of looking through the same eyes, but being treated differently by the way people
Mm.
perceive you is quite enlightening because I remember the first time I used to look like a girl every single day. Whether I was a 6'3" girl or not, I looked femme presenting. The first time I went out with the same group of people as a boy, the difference that people treated me shocked me to my core. And I thought it was different when I wear like crazy outfits. The gender thing was very powerful and it taught me so many lessons about how people have a preconceived idea of what you are. And I think because it's like that aspect of it, it's more about that. It's almost like a social experiment to some degree, because I think it's amazing how people treat you so differently depending on how they look at you, especially in this climate now. So I'm glad I did it. And I didn't just do it for clubs. I lived my life in the daytime in these crazy looks. So it was very different to like a drag queen would wear it at night kind of thing. You
Yeah.
would see what people, it would be amazing. When I would wear all the crazy things, like all the gems are on my face, I go out to Brighton in the middle of the day. People would be like this, like they're pretending they couldn't see you. And I'm like, you clearly can't see. But it's all about that and learning from people, I think.
Yeah. And I guess, you mentioned obviously very early days of YouTube and it being kind of this passion project for you. When did makeup then shift from something that was personal and a kind of a passion to something you realized I can make a career out of this?
Straight away, I went from modeling into the Prince's Trust at the time. Now it's called the King's Trust. I did their enterprise scheme and learned how to do a business plan. I knew from the makeup artist that did my makeup, they said you need to either build a brand or you're not going to make a huge amount of money. And I knew I wanted to make a huge amount of money. And I started to think about like what I wanted to do in the long term. And this is before there was content online. So it's like, I think people don't understand how different the climate was. There was almost a stigma about putting things online at the time.
Yeah.
It wasn't seen as a legitimate way of working, but I knew that it was. And I remember even when I went to university to do my biochemistry masters and I did cosmetic development, part of the degree was a marketing course, and they didn't teach anything about social media marketing at the time. And I remember standing up and talking about it and saying, this is going to blow the socks off everyone's perception of marketing because it's going to change the game. And
Yeah.
it literally was true because I knew I was one of the first beauty creators to work with brands like Lizelle, with MAC. Later, I had a MAC makeup line, which I still celebrate to this day because it was like my starting point. But I just thought that here was a way to bypass gatekeepers. And I think that I'm so lucky in the era that me and my friends did it because we started posting around 2007, 2009 on a trans focused collaboration channel. So that was back then, and we were doing it then. But the main thing about doing makeup was to be part of a community. It wasn't about making money. It wasn't about doing a career. It was like, because there was so little of us that were openly ourselves online at the time. And there was still a stigma around like presenting too much. Like everyone wanted to be a scene kid, but they wanted to wear makeup but not come out as trans. Then later they all came out as
Right.
trans. But it was more about community building. And when I started to do the videos where I focused on transformation, and I pretended I looked like a boy in the beginning. So I'd paint on a fake beard, I'd tie my hair up, and then I would transform into a girl and they would blow up. And no one, I don't think, had seen anything like this online. They'd seen it in maybe like a locage or something, but they wouldn't have seen it in a video format. And it just started to build and build and build and build and build until I eventually won a reality show with Simon Cowell. So it went quite well.
Yeah. Understatement. But it's interesting because, the beauty space is such a fascinating area, as is the modeling space, because it challenges maybe some of the traditional norms around masculinity and femininity. How has your work in makeup, your life in makeup, shaped your own relationship with gender, do you think?
Um, it's like I kind of don't think about it. I know it sounds silly. Like I think about things more like logistically, like, oh, if I've shaved yesterday, I won't be able to do the
Hmm.
campaign with the beard thing tomorrow because I need the beard for it. I don't think about it at all in terms of gender because I've bypassed that years ago. I went through the fire 15 years ago about all this sort of gender identity stuff. And I find it sometimes like I'm a bit avoidant now. Like I actually quit Twitter because I couldn't stand seeing all of the rhetoric that was going on in the back and forth about gender because I'm sick of talking about it. It's like I've already had these discussions when, like, literally, I was 15 and talking about this on YouTube. I really don't want to do it now. I'm in my 30s. I've already had these
Yeah.
conversations. You can go back and watch the videos if you want to. I'm sick of it. I just don't think that it's that big of a deal. And it saddens me that we have made so much progress, but it's all downhill because we are talking about gender in so many different terms and we're losing connection with what's actually in common. I think it's very difficult for me to even like speak about it sometimes when it's in my job because I'm like, I don't want to be the LGBT person. I want to be the best of the job person. And it
Yeah.
frustrates me that you have to almost go through these conversations so many times that you do feel a bit jaded about it. And I still do it because I know it's my job to do that. But it's sad that we've kind of lost what makes us human, and we've got more things in common than different. For God's sake, we've all got to pay the same phone bill. We've all got to deal with family when they're poorly. That's what I consider to be important. Whether you're a he, she, they, them, or whatever, that is a personal thing, and it's obviously to do with your relationships. But I'm not looking to date everyone, so I'm cool. Do you know what I mean? Like it's like I don't really care who you are. I treat everyone the same.
Yeah.
I'm sorry that didn't quite answer the question, but
No, but I think it's interesting, right? Because I think, as a society, we do like to put people into buckets. And historically, we've tried to kind of enforce such a strict perspective on gender that it's made it very difficult, I think, for people to navigate that. And we've said, if you are male, this is what being a man looks like. This is what being a woman looks like. And I think the more that we can, to your point, have a more fluid approach to that and say this is just what humans, and therefore people can act the way and dress and look and be the way that they wish to be, rather than feeling like I have to fit into this bucket or this bucket because that's kind of what society wants me to do. So I completely agree with kind of what you're saying, kind of the underlying message there.
but do you know as well? Like I was watching this person on TikTok, and they're a bit of a controversial figure on TikTok because they identify as trans but don't appear to be transitioning. And I just kept thinking to myself, if a transphobe was walking along the street in a really angry mood or they'd had a few too many drinks, they wanted to pick a fight with someone, do you think they're going to go up and ask someone their pronouns for giving a swing?
Mhm.
Does this stuff, even within the trans community, people are policing what is trans and things. And it's like, I don't think that that is really the biggest risk factor at the moment. I think we've got a lot more to worry about. I think it's, if you look at things in a bigger spectrum, I think that this interfying is almost a distraction from the legislation stuff that's going on. That's the stuff that I'm really intrigued by because
Yeah.
there has always been so many laws around sexual assault, if you're female or male, all of that kind of thing is, or if you're divorcing, like there's so many different things, whether you're going through a custody battle, there's so many differences in terms of the legality of the UK. I can only speak for the UK. I'm not going to go to the US yet, but
Yeah.
um, we're following suit, it seems. But I I would rather look at that and the structural things that affect us than the interpersonal stuff, because I've already challenged the interpersonal stuff in my work. I've done it for such a long time now. I'm actually interested in seeing how the legal stuff is being snuck under the radar, because it's that stuff that really will affect everyone in the long term. I mean, there's so much discussions around like the human rights stuff, and I think that it's becoming a little bit too broad. I think we can be very specific with the things that we need to protect at the moment, but that's probably a bit of a bigger convo. But I'm getting annoyed about it because I think so many people are. I can't judge it because it's like looking at someone that's 10 years younger than you that's gone through what you already have gone through. You can't teach that person. They've got to find out for themselves. But I think the gender discussions that have been going on, I sometimes feel like people are just having them to still be in that debate scenario. I think there is sometimes it's an exercise where people are, I'm not going to say making money from talking about it nonstop, but if there's an issue to solve, they're going to constantly be booked to talk about it. And I have already spoken about it. All of that's recorded. I've done that work. This is the next step we need to focus on, which is the legal stuff. That's, in my opinion, what's next on the list. And yeah, I love to see all the amazing charities in the UK, like Mermaids, like Not a Phase. They're doing the Transmission Festival, which I think is fantastic. Like, I'm so happy that we're celebrating things and it's like a concert kind of festival thing that's going to be fighting the fight. But yeah, I think I'm so not jaded about it because I'm still happy to talk about it. It's like, I do feel like I'm past that discussion now for me.
Yeah. And I also, to your point, that I think the political part of it is incredibly important. We had Jude Watamaki on, who founded the Trans
Love
Solidarity
Jude.
Alliance, and it's a
Yeah.
lot of what they're focused on is how do we make sure there are trans, non-binary, not gender non-conforming voices in those rooms to make sure we are kind of representing the entire, not just the LGBTQ plus community, but the entire community as a whole, to ensure kind of we are, having the right legislation put in place in the right ways to protect people in the ways they should be protected. And obviously, a lot of the conversation you just alluded to, it happened kind of on social media. And you've been such a big part of social media from kind of, like you mentioned, MySpace, for people that now have to quickly Google that. That was the social media back in our day as well. YouTube and so on and so forth. So social media has been such a massive part of your kind of your presence and your personality. What do you think has been the biggest shift from a social media perspective? You mentioned kind of how it's viewed from a marketing perspective as one of them. Like, what's been the biggest shift for you?
Well, when I started, there was a free for all kind of method of finding content, and it shifted when Google got involved in 2015. That's it's been the most significant shift in the tolerance around transgender and gender nonconforming people for me, because before 2015, there was no big agency involvement because like CAA and stuff all got involved with the multi-channel networks, which are the advert part of it where you make your money.
Yeah.
And Google took over and they introduced an algorithm that identified trans people as adult content, regardless of the content you were doing. And they weren't putting you with the same advertisements that would run on a video. So therefore, they started to introduce this thing when they chained content. So like once you'd watch one thing, it would connect to a second thing and it would be custom to your interests.
Right.
So unless you're a computer technician that's programming that with trans people in mind, there is not going to be any chain that's going to connect a trans person when you're watching beauty content, for example. So what we saw happen in that era was we saw a shift from creativity because I made so much money. I'm not saying this in a boastful way. I made so much more money doing YouTube and just the background running income because it didn't have this nonsense. And then after 2015, to be still in the zeitgeist and still be seen as much, you had to adapt your content to debates. So you'd be
Right.
chained with the video from Piers Morgan. Do you remember? And then they started to introduce you, ask you to go on This Morning to talk about trans stuff.
Mm.
It shifted the way, because I'm sorry, it all boils down to the economics. If you're being paid, it doesn't matter if someone's being an arsehole to you, because you can pay for protection, you can pay for medical care, you can pay for a taxi home. When your income's cut, all the access to safety, to self-esteem in some regards is cut short. And you were forced to be in a combative environment instead of being in a creative environment. So you saw like the rise of people like Blair White. Now, I knew Blair White before I transitioned. She's an asshole. I'm going to say that on the podcast. But she was trying to get online as a makeup artist years before, and then she was willing to participate in the social arguments more than she was to actually train to be a makeup artist. Now, that tells you everything you need to know about that person, but it's that I was not willing to do that. I absolutely was not willing to do that. I was not willing to promote things for free, like, because it's a trending music track. I'm not going to promote it for free if I don't like the music. I'm not willing to do things because it's the Met Gala has got millions of pounds of backing and it's the trending thing in the news. I just wasn't interested in doing it because it shifted from organic, interesting changes to everything's meticulously organized to promote certain products. And it really, I'm promising you now, and I worked with Google later on in 2017 and 18. I worked behind the scenes with them on their when they launched Shorts. I
Yeah.
told them that it's ruined the culture of social media because it's made everyone want to fit in as opposed to be creative and unique. And then I think we saw so many different things, like when this is giving some real behind the scenes tea. When Psy came out with Gangnam Style, they introduced this very strange sort of like cheat code behind the scenes with a lot of this Korean music where they oversaturated all these digital pages by it. And they introduced a company called Jelly Smack, which was a European and American version of it. And Jelly Smack basically took content that pre-existed, reformatted it into short form content, and then reposted it on pre-existing Facebook pages and then paid for the content to go out to more people. So there are like loads of people in the UK. There is actually one trans man that was part of this Jelly Smack thing that I like. But the majority of people, it was just about pushing a certain type of content, and it eliminated anyone that was kind of rebellious or unique. This is some real technical tea I'm giving here.
Yeah.
But it made it so you had to be conformist instead of creative, and it shifted everything. That's when things went wrong, in my opinion. And you saw it. You saw the tolerance go down because you didn't see people being unique. You only saw exposure of trans people in a combative environment. Like, who wants to watch someone argue when they're eating their cornflakes in the morning? It's just not going to humanize someone, is it? It's going to put you off them. And we saw the gender quake thing and all of this, Caitlyn Jenner's documentaries, all this stuff came out and it was all sensationalistic because they wanted people to debate it. You were encouraged to comment or kind of rage bait people. Then we saw the rise of the turf. And it's
Yeah.
amazing because it was such a wonderful period, and I feel so sorry for the youngins now because they missed out, and I'm so grateful that I got to do what I did when I did it, but I wouldn't have been able to do it in this era. Absolutely not. I don't believe so.
Yeah. I think I think it's so interesting because there has been such a shift in social media. Like, I think back to the late noughties into the early teens, and social media just felt, from my experience anyway, it was a kind of a positive, almost fun environment to be in. Like, if you take something like a Twitter, what is now X, Twitter was such a fun platform to be on for such a long time. And then there was a very obvious shift where it just became very negative and very, to your point, combative. And, I don't go on Twitter X anymore,
Either.
because I would just go on there and you would just, within the first the first tweet would be something from J.K. Rowling or something, and it would just automatically be negative.
So you
And it's
saw
so
that too.
interesting.
You saw the topic suggested to you that would get you to interact in a negative way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it would infuriate me, and then I would end up kind of scrolling in kind of infuriation until I just kind of got rid of it. So it's super interesting to hear your experience and kind of some of the background knowledge on kind of how that all maybe came to be and how kind of now we're in the situation we're in. And I think one of the obviously biggest things that social media can have a really big impact on, both negatively and positively, but often more negative than anything else, is, I think, mental health. And obviously
Yes.
in the world, from a social media perspective, from a makeup perspective, from a creative perspective, how do you in that world protect your mental health? Because it is an industry that's built on metrics and comparison and public opinion. How do you kind of make sure you're stepping back and protecting you in that environment?
Well, I always think like self-esteem comes from esteemable acts, and I always set myself tasks that I will feel gratification from. So
Right.
instead of obviously I run my businesses successfully, and I've got to do clients and things that might not be my perfect dream client because we've got to all pay the bills and things.
Yeah.
I think that you have to have things that you are doing for yourself that make you feel accomplished, because that is the thing that I'm sad about so much. Because I used to remember when I would do a new creative project or things and I would finish it and think, oh my God, I've done like a really cool job. But it wasn't necessarily for anyone else. It was for
Yeah.
me. And I set myself tasks all the time. Like when I noticed a big shift in this and I was getting really sick of things like Twitter around 20, well, it was around the lockdown really. I
Yeah.
built a second platform called Journal, which is JH instead of just J, so journal.com. And it was just like I was photographing in my hometown where I grew up. They were building houses on the cornfield that I used to play in. And I thought, oh my God, I'm going to have to document this before it all goes and things. And I was
Yeah.
just taking photos on my iPhone, and it reminded me of all the nostalgia that I had growing up here and all the wild strawberries that grew here, or the horse that used to live there, and just weird things that I wanted to document. And now I've got two beautiful nieces that I adore. I wanted to keep something historical for them and do something that was more than just me. So I made an effort not to put me in front of any of the pictures. It was all about kind of like divert, and I've made a play on the words LGBT. So it was lifestyle, give back, beauty, and travel. So I set myself 4 verticals to create in that was, I didn't think I was going to get paid from it. I just thought I was going to do it literally to document my area before it got renovated and things. But it was like, it became an amazing sort of like, just I enjoyed it. And I was like paying attention to things that I would normally walk by. Sometimes when you just stop and you just look at something like a flower, or you try and remember what that flower's called and things, and you think about your nan, and when you had like a hilarious time where she ran down the road in a go-kart and things at like 80 years old, and all these like crazy memories would come back, and I would think like, oh my God, that is so good. But I do understand that that comes from a position of privilege to some degree, because people are using social media to try and generate an income. And
Yeah.
I didn't do it for that reason. So it's difficult because it's like it is a work thing, but I guess you have to work at your self-esteem and you have to work at your mental health, don't you? I think it's
Yeah.
really important to talk to therapists sometimes. Like I went through a horrific situation in 2015. It was actually when my friend the Vivian, who's no longer with us, she won the Drag Race Ambassador Party, and at that event, I was unfortunately attacked. Um, so after that event, I suffered a very serious eye injury that really impacted my career, and I kept all the PTSD of that inside me, and I didn't know about therapy. It wasn't something that was spoken about, and I had to go through EDMR and talk about things and kind of process all that was internalized. And that was freeing, but I didn't
Mm.
have that in my toolkit. I wasn't aware of what you could do. And it sounds silly, but sometimes I'm from the families that don't even take medicine. So it's like,
Yeah.
it's just the way that I had to learn it for myself. But just talking about things, and I make a big effort every single weekend. My family will come over. I cook loads of different foods and spend time with everyone that I love. All of those things, I think, are part of building a healthy relationship with mental health, I guess. That's what I do.
Yeah.
But everyone's got to find their own way.
Yeah, that is fair. And you mentioned a couple of things there, which I would love to kind of wrap up on, which is you mentioned obviously the cornfield and kind of growing up in that experience. You mentioned your family. So, and we started this conversation talking about your younger self. So I'd love to revisit them. If you
Yes.
could give your younger self one piece of advice, what would it be? And would it be different if I said, what advice would you just give to young LGBTQ plus people today?
Oh my God. Well, there's a slightly serious one, which is you have to learn everything about tax when you're younger. Do all the tax research, find out everything that you need to learn because it is a mission when you're older to try and figure everything out sometimes.
Yeah,
Thank God my mum's an accountant, so she's guided me through all the
helpful.
hardships that I've faced. Oh my God, I almost got in trouble once, but we're not going to go there.
Okay.
Learn about money because I think money is deliberately not spoken about by people. There's especially in England, people are very scared of talking about financial stuff. But I can't even like imagine how difficult it will be to start today. Because even to buy a makeup kit is extortionate. Do you know what I
Mm.
mean? Like, I'm so like that's the best thing I've ever done in my life. Is I used to dream about going into Boots when I was a kid and just going, I want this, I want this. Now I get it all for free. It's so good. It's so good. I'm so happy. I'm still overjoyed every time I get these big parcels every week. But no, that's if I was going to give myself some advice, it would just be, oh God, don't react to things. I was so defensive and sort of because I wasn't aware of a lot of stuff. I had to teach myself a lot of normal things as I got older. I would take things wrong and I wouldn't know differently.
Right.
I wish I was there to say, girl, just calm down. You'll be fine. Because I would really tell someone off if I thought they were saying something shady to me. And sometimes they probably just weren't. They were just teasing or
Mm,
it's not that big of a deal, but I think I would have taught that. And with young people today, collaborate. Don't be in competition with each other. It is so integral. Everything I've done, I've always done it as a group of people. I've always brought people in because they trick us into thinking there's only room for one trans person in the room. And it's such BS. We have to work together. We have to all do things. I'm always going to be there to help someone. People always message me. They're like, Joe, how do you do this? We need to do a PR thing. And I'm like, okay, let me help you. I'll send you one I've got. And like, I'm open to do that with everyone. If someone needs to help with the management or whatever, I will be there for them because I got a lot of mental shit from amazing older people myself. So I want to give that back. So not that I'm perfect. I've made all the mistakes, but I can help if I can.
yeah. I love that. I think that's such an important message. We're so much stronger together, and the more we can all look out for each other, right? Build each other up rather than trying to tear each other down. I think is super important.
Yes.
Joe, thank you so much for being on Queer Talker. This has been such an interesting conversation. We've gone across social media, the makeup industry, the modeling industry, Tyra Banks. We've kind of hit on it all. So I really appreciate you being on the podcast and joining me on Queer Talker today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I know it was a bit of a serious one at times. I'm sorry I'm a bit of a crazy kooky character, but that's me. And I'm so grateful to even share anything about my work. I'm so happy to have got to know you. Thank you.